All right, so I'm happy to introduce Jesse Newland. He was formerly the CTO at Rails Machine and is now with GitHub, talking to you about Puppet at GitHub, which I'm interested in hearing about.
Thank you. Hello. So my name is Jesse Newland. I go by J Newland on the internets, and I do ops at GitHub. Today I'm going to be talking about Puppet at GitHub. Really, I'm going to be telling a story in two parts. First, I'll be talking about all the amazing Puppet open source projects Tim Sharp has written, but he doesn't want to talk about. Hey, Tim. And then second, I'll be talking about how we use them at GitHub. But then I'll be introducing the star of the GitHub ops team, Hubot. And I'll be telling you a little bit about something we've been calling chat ops. But before I get into all of that, I'm actually going to talk about an upcoming talk, one by a coworker of mine, Will Farrington. He's going to be giving that tomorrow at 2:45 p.m. about something we're calling the setup, which is our Puppet-powered GitHubber laptop management solution. It's pretty amazing, and it's one of the coolest uses of Puppet I've ever seen. I think it's going to completely change how you think about your development environment. But I'm not going to be talking about that at all today. Sorry, but go to Will's talk tomorrow. You won't be disappointed. So I guess you could say that I'm talking about the rest of Puppet at GitHub. For the scope of this talk, I'm going to be talking about the Puppet infrastructure that runs github.com. So we've been managing GitHub's infrastructure with Puppet for 4 years, since our move to Rackspace. There's a ton of code, and we're developing at a pretty rapid pace. It's almost 100,000 lines of code in the repo. That includes a lot of vendored stuff, but it's large. But we're obsessed with keeping our Puppet deployment simple. And for now, we use a single Puppet master running a lot of unicorns. Nothing fancy. It works for now, and we're going to keep scaling that up as long as we can. We don't run Puppet in the agent mode, but rather run it via cron every hour in combination with runs triggered via Hubot, which I'll talk about more. We don't use an ENC, but rather we give nodes DNS names that adhere to a naming convention that maps them to a predefined role. It looks more complicated than it is. Role definitions are kind of where the magic happens. We use defines here instead of parameterized classes, largely because we've been doing this since before parameterized classes were a thing. And we try to dry up common functionality into our core module and build other simple modules for common functionality across apps. This, for example, is our CI suite, and it includes a simple app and nginx config to run that app. Pretty simple and straightforward. We generally try to avoid templates for configuration files in favor of using Agios. This lets us manage small pieces of configuration we care about and use the OS defaults for things we don't. It also helps expose changes as we're going through OS upgrades. When defaults in the system might change, we want to make sure that we understand why they've changed and integrate that into our config properly. But I don't want to just show you guys Puppet code for 30 minutes. That's going to be pretty boring if I do that. Rather, I'd rather talk about what's interesting about how we use Puppet at GitHub. And what I think is the most interesting is our focus on ensuring that the Puppet development workflow is easily accessible to everyone at GitHub. We're doing our best to make Puppet less scary for people that aren't familiar with it, so they can help the ops team grow and evolve our infrastructure. We're doing some things right here, but there's still a lot of work to do. I've been thinking about this a lot recently, as we've just had 2 large infrastructure projects shipped by people that were completely or relatively new to Puppet. First, Derek Greentree shipped a Cassandra cluster, and Adam Rubin shipped Puppet manifests for one of our Windows builds and CI servers, for managing all of our Windows build and CI servers. And that's a pretty epically long pull request. I tried to screenshot the whole page and put it there in the background. And during this process, Adam learned Puppet and then managed all of our Windows infrastructure with Puppet, which is pretty amazing. This is an awesome trend, and this is something I'd like to see continue at GitHub. So I thought I'd talk a bit today about what we're doing to try to enable even more of this. For us, a really important part of making Puppet development accessible for other developers at GitHub is making the development flow on our Puppet code base as similar as possible to that of any other GitHub Ruby project. And that means sticking with some common conventions that we use elsewhere. That means making it as easy to set up as any other project at GitHub, just one simple command. So under the hood, Ruby dependencies are managed by bundler, and Puppet dependencies are managed by something called library and Puppet, a bundler-like library that manages the Puppet modules your infrastructure depends on and can install them directly from GitHub repositories. I'm of the opinion that the unit of open source currency is no longer a tarball downloaded from something called StarForge. It's a GitHub repo. All the developers at GitHub feel the same way, so Tim wrote library and Puppet to make that flow easy. So if you're keeping score at home, that's 1. Making Puppet flow like other projects at GitHub means making things that might seem trivial, but making sure we have good editor support for the language is really important. Then Puppet, number 2. It means making running tests a simple one-step process. And it means having tests. Tests are super important, especially for new developers. A solid and easy-to-use test harness helps build developer confidence in a new language. It helps them jump right in without feeling scared that they're going to completely destroy something, and helps them develop in a language they don't understand and don't really know yet. They're a crucial safety net for helping people cut their teeth on Puppet, we found. If they break something, if they throw a semicolon in the wrong place, they're immediately alerted to that fact. If they don't understand how exported resources are interacting, they're immediately aware of that fact. So we use Rspec Puppet heavily. If you haven't used it yet, go check it out right now, please. It's pretty amazing. There are no less than 3 talks at PuppetConf touching on Rspec Puppet, so I'm not going to talk about how to use it at all. Just touch a little bit on how we use it. So 3. Tim's been pretty prolific recently. We try our best to adequately test our individual Puppet modules, but our central and most frequently touched specs exercise our role system. There's one spec for each role which describes its intended functionality. They focus on critical functionality of each role, and they help a great deal to build confidence that we're not introducing regressions when adding or refactoring functionality or working in other roles. For an even faster feedback loop than running specs, all Puppet dev environments get automatically set up with a pre-commit hook that checks for syntax errors and ensures your changes conform to the style guide. This has proved pretty amazingly useful for Puppet novices and experts alike. Novices finding that it helps them understand language conventions quickly and guides them towards solutions, and experts using it to catch typos and help them not look like novices. So that's 4. Rspec Puppet and Puppet-Lint are automatically run by CI on every commit on every branch pushed to our Puppet repo. Once master passes CI, Puppet is automatically deployed to the Puppet master. As you can see on that last slide, Hubot automates a lot of the process of rolling out Puppet for us. That covered a simple example of pushing changes to master, but what about a pull request-based workflow? We use that pretty heavily at GitHub. So say we have a pull request for a branch that we want to merge, and that we've reviewed the code and it all looks good, right? On each deploy to the Puppet master, we turn all Git branches into Puppet environments. And this, combined with Heaven, our Capistrano-powered deployment API that we interact with via Hubot, enables us to experiment with unmerged Puppet branches in a powerful way. So to safely merge this pull request and to confirm that everything's going to work along the way, you first might ask Hubot to confirm that it's green in CI. And Hubot will tell you that, yeah, it looks good. Then you might roll the branch out to a staging box to make sure that everything applies cleanly there. So in one step, you can deploy Puppet/the branch to staging/the box. Hubot will run that via Capistrano and send all the results back to you. Here you can see that it upgraded the package. Then if you wanted an extra layer of confidence, you could then no-op that branch against a production node. So, yep, looks good. Next, you'd merge the pull request. If you stop here, our cron system would gradually roll out the code to all affected nodes over the next hour. If you wanted the rollout to happen faster than that, you could force a Puppet run on the affected class of nodes. So here you can deploy, apply Puppet to prod fs. And you can see that all worked. Then you'd probably want to check out load to make sure nothing went crazy, and you can ask Hubot for that too. Hubot will give you a nice graph. And maybe you might want to check some logs or other related metrics to confirm that your change didn't break anything. You can ask Hubot for that too. Hubot talks to Papertrail. So how we interact with Puppet via Hubot is a great example of a core principle of how we do ops at GitHub. We've been calling it chat ops recently. Essentially, chat ops is the result of Hubot becoming sentient and decreeing, among other things, that we now address him as supreme leader and communicate with our infrastructure via his secured channels alone. We occasionally observe him speaking in tongues, and they sound eerily like YouTube comments. Actually, that's not it at all. Hubot is the star of our ops team. We use Hubot day in, day out to interact with other simple tools we've written over JSON APIs. Shell, we have a bunch of shell scripts that we use to manage and monitor our infrastructure. Heaven, which is the Capistrano API that I spoke of earlier. Janky, which is essentially an API wrapper around Jenkins. And graphme, which is a tool that we use internally to generate graphs from graphite. And Hubot also interacts really nicely with tons of external APIs, like you saw with Papertrail briefly a second ago. If you have a JSON API, making your services work with Hubot is a piece of cake. But why do we obsess about Hubot so much? It's just a simple chatbot. We all have IRC bots or Campfire bots. But there are some distinct upsides to pushing a lot of operational automation into this chat op that we've seen. And as our use of Hubot in ops grows, we're starting to really, really like this idea. Remember this flow that I just showed you for rolling out Puppet changes to our infrastructure? What's key about having that in chat is that everyone sees all of that happen from the minute they join GitHub. It's right there in the ops room, right in the middle of the conversation in Campfire. You don't just see how to roll out Puppet. You get to see things like how to check the status of a branch's build, how to deploy any branch of any GitHub app to any server in our infrastructure, how to get graphs of app performance, how to check the status of unicorns across all front ends. It's our Ruby web server we use. How to check the status of a rescue queue, how to check the load on the front ends, how to check current connections on a front end that you suspect might have a problem, how to grab the smoke logs for that front end and realize that you did, in fact, break something, how to take it out of the load balancer, how to update the status blog, how to determine who's on call so you can apologize profusely to them for breaking things, how to check pingdom to make sure you haven't broken everything, how to chill yourself out real quick, how to revert back to master on the busted front end, how to verify things that have returned to normal, how to get pumped up when you fixed it, how to bring the front end back into the rotation, how to clear the status page. Once the outage is resolved, you might grab who is information on an IP that you saw in the middle of the debugging that looks suspicious. And then you could use meme generator to make a joke about spammers. And then someone would cue up the song that popped in their head when they thought about drums and gorillas at the same time. And then we could finish that all off with a tweet about a drink up that we're throwing on Friday night for PuppetConf. That's chat ops. Chat ops means building tools that make it easier to operate your infrastructure via Hubot than via Terminal or Chrome. This is the key point here, because by placing tools directly in the middle of the conversation, everyone is pairing all of the time. Let me go back and do that again. By placing tools in the middle of the conversation, everyone is pairing all of the time. That's the core concept behind chat ops. Teaching by doing. Teaching by doing is awesome. And Ryan Tomeko, the original creator of Hubot, had this in mind from the very first commits. Initially, Hubot was just a simple wrapper around a repository of shell scripts that we use for managing and monitoring our infrastructure. And Ryan wanted to show everyone how to use those. So this is how I generally respond to, how do I do X? Now, I just do it. And the person that doesn't know how to do this sees it, and they see how it all works. And if there's not yet Hubot functionality for that thing, we try to write it. If we don't write it, we write docs, and then the docs get out of date, and eventually we go back to those docs, delete them, and write Hubot automation for it. Placing tools in the middle of the conversation also means that you get communication of your work for free. If you're doing something in a terminal or on a website, you have to do it and then tell people about it. If you do it with Hubot, that comes free. So here are a few examples of things that I haven't asked recently because of our use of Hubot. How's that deploy going? Are you deploying that, or should I? Is anyone responding to that alert? Is that branch green? How does load look? Did anyone update the status page, or should I? Did that deploy finish? These are all things that we don't ask anymore in the scope of operations. We know them. We see them happen. Free communication is especially crucial in a distributed environment, and GitHub is a very distributed company. We don't have any two ops people working in the same location at all, in the same city. This conference is one of the occasional times that we're all in the same place. And this is where Lee Huffman is working from right now. Lee can do this, and we can all do that because we focus on building everything into Hubot. And free communication is extremely helpful during outages or other situations that require tactical response. You don't have to say that you're spraying water on the fire. People see you doing it. Another awesome benefit of chat-opsing all of the things is that you can hide ugly interfaces and design exactly the interactions you want with some simple porcelain commands. My favorite example of this is the ugliest of the ugly. So for us, Hubot politely delivers Nagios alerts directly in the chat, which we can interact with without any unnecessary eye bleeding. Making this easy means developers and other ops engineers and even everyone actually mute things or schedule downtime when they're testing. If it's easy, they'll actually do it. Yet another awesome benefit of chat ops is that you get mobile support for free. Well, that is, if you have John Maddox and a team of awesome iOS developers that have built an actually functioning Campfire client for the iPhone. This lets you do anything Hubot can do from your phone, which means from your couch or your bed or a beach in Hawaii, which means you can fix lots of things and triage situations without getting your laptop out of your bag at dinner. And that's chat ops at its finest. And while I'm showing off mobile stuff, I think part of the principle of chat ops is putting tools directly in front of developers. And while ops is mobile, the tool that they all have in their hand is this. We all have an iPhone or an Android device, or I'm not going to talk about that. I prefer the iPhone. So we've built a lot of automation around ops and iOS. We've hacked together PagerDuty alerts via Apple push notifications. And the best part of this is that when you swipe on the alert, you go directly to the mobile UI for the alert, which lets you hack it while you're still in bed. That makes on-call so amazingly less shitty. Making those interactions easy and giving you information necessary to make decisions and respond while you're in the process of frantically dashing to your car to get your laptop is very, very essential. So who better to summarize all this than Hubot himself? I asked Hubot what he thought about chat ops. Here's what he said. Listen to Hubot. You'll love it. Your ops team will love it. And you'll help other developers learn how to interact with ops tools without any additional work. That's awesome. And if you can't chat ops all the things at your gig now, you can just come work with me. Hit me up if you're interested. That's all I have. Any questions? Yes. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, I like the concept of Hubot and all the tasks that you have been able to automate. Mm-hmm. I've got actually 3 questions.
Sure.
The first one, I mean, it seems that I can pretty much automate all of these things and have all those functionality with a bunch of rake tasks or Thor scripts and stuff like that. So it seems kind of, I was just wondering why create another tool? How do I kind of go about defining one more tool for doing all that kind of stuff if I'm already doing some of those things with rake tasks?
Sure.
And then I'll just repeat, I'll just ask the questions.
Okay.
you also mentioned, that is the first question. The second question is, you said you have one master managing a bunch of hosts. So I was just wondering what was the size that you were able to scale with one master? So that's my second question. And the third is, basically, did you find a use case for using stages and tags in your Puppet configurations?
We don't use a lot of stages. I'll go, I guess, in reverse order. We don't use a lot of, I think we have 2 stages, and one is a pre that handles some initial setup, and then we have everything else. We don't use tags at all in our Puppet infrastructure. It's something that we just haven't brought into it yet. I think that largely that dates from the fact that we've been working on this Puppet infrastructure since before that stuff was available. On the one Puppet master thing, I think we're at, I don't know, 200-ish nodes around now. That's my best estimate for right now. And there are some times where the Puppet master is a bottleneck, but we're hoping to see some benefits from the 3.0 upgrade, which I think we're going to be rolling out very soon. We'll see how that goes. But we're planning on vertically scaling that for as long as possible, just to avoid confusion and management problems. And your first question was, if you have rake tasks, why do it through Hubot? Okay. Sure. A lot of these things, a lot of what we use Hubot for are things that are in that shell repository that Ryan essentially originally created Hubot to wrap. And the core reason is so that they're in the middle of the conversation, so that people see you doing them. So you don't have to, even if you have a rake task and you run it, you have to tell someone that you did that, right? If it's right there in the middle of the chat room and right there in the middle of the conversation, then it removes unnecessary work that you'd have to communicate to people that you did this. And these are generally things that are built for operating the entire infrastructure, not your local development environment. So they're things that you would want to communicate to people already. So if you wrap maybe your rake tasks with a Hubot, with a Hubot script, then you don't have to tell people once you've done them. You don't have to tell them that you're about to run them. They just see it, and they see the results of it. So if there's an error, they can help you fix it, rather than you copying and pasting the error and pasting it into chat and asking for help. Sure. You want to hit the mic so we get the stream? Yes, thank you.
Hi. So my question was, how long did the rollout process of this take, and were there any major obstacles that you had to overcome in order to get buy-in from the whole team?
Hubot, I believe, the initial commits were around August 2010, and it's been a slow, growth. But I think in the past year, we've pretty aggressively started putting things in there. I think that that's happened as the ops team has grown. We were, I guess, 3 people around a year ago, and now we're 8 and even more, I think 9. So as the ops team has grown, we've had training, requirements. We've had to train new people and help them understand how to operate our infrastructure. And there hasn't been a lot of, specific, this as a mapped out plan. It's just been something that's naturally happened as, myself and Tim and other members, and Ryan and other people that operate a lot of these tools favor doing this rather than writing long documentation or going through training processes. Yeah. If you can show someone how to do something by doing it yourself, then that's less work for you when you bring on a new member of staff.
Yeah,
so I think as we've had more ops team members join, it's demonstrated again and reinforced the value of this.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah.
Cool. Sure. That's fine, I'll repeat the question.
All right, cool. So you're working on something goes wrong, and suddenly you're getting innocuous alerts every 30 seconds and Puppet failures all across the board, and suddenly your scrollback is just launched forward. How do you deal with that?
A lot of these alerts actually go into a notices room, and there's an ops room. So there's a lot of these notices that go into ops. And there's a lot of alerts that actually go into a notices room. And the separation of those 2 rooms, the alerts that come into the ops room and the information that comes into the ops room is meant for, it's kind of critical stuff that requires everyone's attention. And actually, a kind of great feature / bug of this whole thing is that a lot of the automation for that happens via GitHub. So when things actually go down with GitHub, one of the first things you'll see is a lot of that stops, which is nice and bad. And there are other places that we can find all this information at the same time. So the signal versus noise hasn't been a considerable problem. And we have several different rooms, campfire rooms, that are designed specifically for people to experiment with things. We have a lab room where it's intended that people ask for Google images of pugs and do whatever and test out whatever they're working on with Hubot. So, any other questions? Let's get this gentleman.
How do you manage pushing Hubot? Obviously, feature starters or people are playing with it. Do you run multiple?
Right now, we run one Hubot that's deployed via Hubot. Hubot actually recently entirely deployed itself until a few days ago, and now it's deployed via other infrastructure. And we have facilities for getting it back up and running in another environment very quickly if that's necessary. One more?
Yeah, so was this a primarily ops project? I mean, I don't know how your structure is there. If you had like steal a dev to like rewrite some cool stuff, or is this all kind of you guys?
It started with Ryan Tomeko, who's squarely, I guess, identifies with development, but also does a lot of operations stuff as well. I think it's not a project of any team. It's just a project of people that need to solve a problem and ask how to do it, and end up finding that it's a long process that they should automate, and then they'll write a simple Hubot script to do it. It's just it's a problem-solving tool. It's not really a project of any team, I guess. One more, I guess.
So can all developers at GitHub just deploy using Hubot, or are there permissions involved?
There are no permissions involved other than asserting against a simple role system that you're trusted and that you're a member of GitHub. If our accountant wanted to, she could deploy GitHub to production. We found that role systems and permissions like that in our organization, where we really kind of encourage trust, are just an unnecessary barrier, and they just require work for other people to twiddle the knobs in the proper direction. Well, thanks, everyone. I have one more note before I go, and it's that we're throwing a drink up tomorrow night at 8:30 at Zeke's, which is 3rd and Brannon. If you want to have some beers and talk with me more about Puppet, GitHub, or Hubot, or anything, I'll be there, and everyone's invited. Thanks.